We have about 45 participants registered, so we are hoping we can give everybody a chance as we go along, but certainly the people who raise their hands will try to accommodate them first. Yeah, so today's topic for the discussion is distance learning for children with no internet access. I will just give a very brief overview of what we discussed last time under the topic of home-based learning during COVID. That was about 2 weeks ago. So it's a few points that emerged after the last discussion were that more than 60% of households with school-going children had no access to internet. So even the 35 to 37% of households with school-going children which had access to internet, that was largely, nearly 90%, through the use of smartphones, through some mobile network or the other. So out of that 35 to 40% of households with internet access with school-going children, the real-time face-to-face online teaching was able for only a very tiny percentage of students. And that too for maybe an hour or two a day, and that too in very selected schools in very urban areas. The largest percentage of distance learning had happened through tutorials, notes, sent on apps like WhatsApp and Viber on smartphones. In other words, no real education had taken place. It was a continuation of spoon feeding of notes, but of course the children also had their textbooks in hand. So today, Dr. Sujata Gamage and her team from LIRNEasia is going to give us a presentation on this situation of how distance learning for children with no internet access can happen, but prior to that, the status vis-a-vis the hierarchy of internet access versus telephone, versus television, versus post and everything else. So we will open the discussion soon after they finish their presentation. That presentation would finish around 3:10, I'm expecting. So when we open the discussion, we will allow questions, comments on any of the areas that they are presenting or any other item that you want to speak on. So while we expect to go live streaming on Facebook, Ayesha has kindly reminded me to inform you that the Google form that has been sent needs to be filled in with your information. That's very important for us because when we have the next policy dialogue, we must make sure that everybody is invited. And that finally, if there is thunder, lightning, any inclement weather interrupting this Zoom discussion, we may have to pause earlier than we intended. Nevertheless, we hope we can go on with the discussion until about 5 o'clock and have a very fruitful conclusion at the end. Right, so with that, I will hand the platform over to Sujata and her team. Tharaka is ready, I think, and Ayesha for their presentation, and thereafter we can have the discussion straight away. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tara. Can you, my mic is on, right? You can hear me? Yes, okay. Yeah, actually it's really Ayesha, Zainudeen and her team, and I'm getting their help. So, you know, what Tara briefly talked about what we gathered from the last dialogue. It was still very anecdotal, and I like to tell you that we are in the process of getting lot more data through an online survey form. We'll let you know about that after this. And so we are talking about the ideal. She briefly talked about the ideal. The ideal is online real-time classroom. You know, school closes, but at home you can get your online real-time experience. There are textbooks, of course, to supplement, but there'll be a lot more other things to supplement. Again, children going to the internet, teachers sending them links. And then after the online real-time experience, there'll be interaction between the teacher and the rest of the class. So that's the ideal. But the reality is driven by two things. One is access, which is again determined by the devices children have, and the connectivity, which actually LIRNEasia has done an extensive survey, and Ayesha and Tharaka will talk about that. And the second thing is content. You have the device, you have connectivity, but what's the content? I'm just going to briefly talk about the content issue before Ayesha and Tharaka come on, because both these are important when we think about access, getting access to this more than 60% of households, children who live in households without internet access. So the content issue is what I would call spoon feeding meets a smartphone. So I'm not going to say dumb teaching meets smartphone. It's not fair by our teachers, because actually we are supported and I think joined by some teachers who work very hard. Actually, teachers who are working hard at this time, we find they work really, really hard. So, but it's not, they are driven by the examination-centric system, and that's driving the spoon feeding. And what's happening, we find, is that there's spoon feeding going on the smartphone, and mainly through WhatsApp. Again, our evidence, we just by talking about altogether about 20 children and their experience, but we are going to get more through our survey. So that is the issue. So when we're talking about increasing, giving a distant learning experience, we need to look at both these things. We have to somehow change this content somehow. Content meaning not the curriculum. Curriculum is fine in a way. There's too much content. And then teachers can't do just what they did on the blackboard. And they would have done on the blackboard and just take pictures of their notes and send it to children. So in that sense, we've been working with two teachers. I hope they are online. Ms. Pushpika Abhiratna from Maharagama Janadipati Vidyalaya, and actually Ms. Yamuna Ratnayaka, and from Gannoru, Ranabima Royal, and Ms. Subhashini Vijayawardena, she's a retired teacher from Gampas Holy Cross. We are trying with just on a very small scale to see whether we can change the content a little bit, the way it's delivered, not the content. We can't change the content. This curriculum is there, and really integrate some of the subjects, and just not send children only some suggestions for activities, for which children then use their textbooks, talk to their family, gather things from the environment. When right now there's so much you can do around COVID itself. You can teach science, geography, all those themes can be brought together in what's called thematic teaching. And actually Finland recently announced, I think last year, that they're really going to do away with subjects and going into themes. So maybe COVID and necessity is, we are limited. Not all our children can have the online real-time classroom experience. Maybe we will be able to at least put forward that idea credibly that it's possible to do thematic teaching. So that's something we are trying now. So that's another idea. But we like to hear a lot more ideas from you all on how to reach these children, actually in two ways. Children with no access, and also the children with somewhat, some medium level of access, just they may have a smartphone. But how do we improve our teaching and learning and the content, and what kind of additional devices, additional supplementary material do we need for that? So that's a discussion we like to have. So for that, before that, then I will talk about, I invite Ayesha and Tharaka. Ayesha Zainudeen is a senior researcher at LIRNEasia, and Tharaka is our statistician. Tharaka Amarasinghe is our statistician at LIRNEasia. And they will talk about the survey and the results of the survey. Over to you, Ayesha.
You have to unmute your mic, Ayesha.
And we need to share the screen.
Okay, so while I'm sharing the screen, so what I'm going to be sharing with you is some of the findings, some of the relevant findings of a large multi-country survey that LIRNEasia has done in Asia. We covered 6 countries, but it's a global effort which has in total covered 23 countries. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Is it? Can you see the screen? We can. Yes. Sorry about that. Right. So as I said, this is a large multi-country study. We conducted most of the surveys. We collected the data between 2017 and 2018, late 2018 in Sri Lanka. And the surveys are nationally representative of the 15 to 65 age group in each of the countries. So it gives us a good basis for decision making and bringing evidence to the policy process. And for those of you who don't know, we're a regional think tank based in Sri Lanka, and we focus on digital policy and regulation issues. So I actually am going to keep this very brief because I'm sure there'll be a lot of stuff, there'll be more discussion, more time for discussion, which is always good. And just kind of jump in here. So as I said, the target group was the 15 to 65 population in Sri Lanka. And just to kind of first give you the bigger picture from the survey. So what we found was mobile penetration or mobile ownership in the country is quite, we're doing well in terms of the region. So 78% of the target group, Sri Lankans aged 15 to 65 own a mobile. And when you look at us compared to say India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, we're pretty much ahead of everyone in the countries that we covered. So the countries we covered were Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Cambodia. Sri Lanka was the richest of the 6 countries. Nepal is the poorest, which becomes relevant a few slides later down the line. But the thing is, almost half of these phones are still basic mobile phones. So even though a lot of people have mobiles, they still can only do basic calling and SMS, which is, through a basic phone. There's a small amount of people who have feature phones, which give you a little bit more of a, you can do some internet activities. You can, there are some apps that can be run, but compared to a smartphone where you have a full-on internet experience, touch phone, voice, apps, everything, feature phone is really not, it doesn't give you that much, you can't do a whole lot with it. So smartphone ownership was around 47% of this particular target group. So when we look at Sri Lankans on an individual basis. Then secondly, what we found was among this target group, 37% have used the internet at the time, up to the time when we surveyed them. And what we know from this is, it was mentioned earlier as well, most of this is through smartphones. There's very little computer penetration. And most of the activity that is most of what people are doing on the internet is fairly basic, I would say, still. So still it's, very much social media centric. And not that people are not doing other things other than social, sort of keeping in touch with people and, liking things and stuff like that. People are doing other things through social media, like looking at news, obviously reading news and finding more general information. But still, when you consider what the capabilities of a smartphone, we're still kind of at a very basic level, I would say. And also we have a lot of, across the region, Sri Lanka is possibly one of the countries where the gaps are not so bad, but we do have disparities between men and women, and urban and rural still. So to give you an idea, in Sri Lanka, there's a gender gap of 34% in mobile ownership. So what this means, in internet use. So what this means is women are 34% less likely to use the internet than men. When we go on to look at TV and radio access and use, in contrast to internet use, it's pretty high. So 91% of households have access to TV, 84% have access to radio, and usership is fairly close behind. So then what we have done for this particular intervention with Sujatha, what we've been looking at, what Tharaka has been very busy doing, is zooming in on the households with children. So anyone below the age of 18. Unfortunately, the way our survey was designed, we cannot really disaggregate beyond the below 15 years. So we're looking at houses where there are children even below 5 who may not be going to school, but then still, in the next 5 years, they'll be coming into the schooling system, right? So looking at the device and ownership and access and internet use in those households, what we find is less than half of all these households have, are able to avail of e-learning opportunities, because when you take so let's look at the devices first. So that if you look at this ring chart, the green rings in the center are device ownership or device availability in the household. So tabs 4%, desktop 7%, laptops 15%, but smartphones 48%. Then when you look at the level of internet access or availability in a household, so the red rings, you have 34% of these households have some form of internet access. But when it comes to, obviously, when it comes to being able to access e-learning opportunities, it's only that 33% that has both of these. It has the device and it has the internet connection to be able to make use of these opportunities. So when we compared Sri Lanka with the countries in the region that we studied, we're at the top end, but I would say Nepal, which, as I said earlier, is the poorest of these 6 countries, is actually doing better than us because they have higher internet penetration. So they have both criteria. They have, they have the smartphones, but they also have internet access. So then they can make use of these opportunities. Whereas we have a whole bunch of households with the smartphone, but they don't have internet access to make use of the opportunities. So then we also took a look, we cut the data by socioeconomic status of the houses. So socioeconomic SEC group A is the houses which are at the top end. So most educated, the sort of professional occupational groups, whereas SEC D is at the other end of the scale where you have, obviously less of these things. So there's a huge divide between when you compare the SEC A's versus the SEC B's. And obviously that's a huge issue because, then if you look at the SEC D's and E's, then access, the opportunity to access these possibilities is much lower, right? But even when you consider the SEC, so the highest socioeconomic group households in Sri Lanka, we still don't have 100% access. We have, at the most, 59% of these houses can make use of these opportunities, which is, it's still pretty worrying. If you take the same, so then we cut the data by urban and rural. Again, you see a disparity, but it's not as stark as you see in the upper set of graphs, the socioeconomic, the breakdowns. So in terms of barriers to smartphone ownership, what we've seen, so this is going back to the larger sample across the board in Sri Lanka. The barriers to smartphone ownership So this is among people who already own a mobile, but it's not yet a smartphone. There's a whole load of people that say they don't need one. Feature phone or basic phone is enough for them. But there's still almost a quarter that says, I can't afford it. It's too expensive for me. So that is a barrier that we need to think about in terms of device. Similarly, in terms of in terms of, say, the usage cost data, when we look at the Broadband Commission's targets for affordability, the target for 2025 is that 1 gigabyte of mobile broadband should cost no more than 2% of monthly income. This is a slightly old definition, and it probably would, it would need updating as time goes by, but still just indicatively, because this is the time the survey was done. So going by that criteria, on the whole, Sri Lanka still does, on the whole, we meet the criteria. So we can get it, say, on average, get a gigabyte of data with about 0.5% of monthly income. But when you do, again, you do the income breakdowns, and we look at, say, the poorest deciles going up to the richest, the poorest 6 deciles, so 60% of the population, for 60% of the population, a gigabyte of mobile broadband is by this definition, not affordable. So even if you look at the, in the worst case, the poorest decile, it's 7.5% of monthly income. So we still have a lot of, there's still a lot to be done in terms of just getting devices into people's hands and getting people on the internet and so on. I mean, the other barrier that I just wanted to touch upon before I finish is skills. Even if you have the device, are people able to actually use it in a productive way in order to access these, the e-learning kind of opportunities and things that are happening. So it's really obvious. I mean, obviously, it's only people who have smartphones in their hands or who already use the internet that can do any of these things. So we asked people if they're able to do any of these things, or have they done any of these things on the internet or online. So basic things like searching for information, 36% can. Going up to more advanced stuff like locating and adjusting your settings on an app, so privacy settings, passwords, all that kind of stuff. Still, there's a large number of people that don't know how to do these things. So and just anecdotally, there's about a quarter of, I think it was a quarter, or a fairly large number of people that we talked to in the context of this particular question actually hadn't even heard of any of these things. They just didn't know. So there's clearly a long way to go, and it's not just about being able to do these things as well. One, from the parent perspective, but two, from the child perspective. But it's also about being able to manage that once you're online, being able to manage that internet experience and the child themselves being able to ensure that they're able to experience the internet in a safe way and not be put at risk, because even say even if they're on a Zoom call class or something, they're still going to linger around on various websites stuff after the class is over. I know this from experience. So you need to make sure that the kids have this capability to manage that experience by themselves. And I think from what we have, we've looked at the school ICT textbooks, and really all we see is, if you going up below O-level grade, we see that really all that is taught in this area is that you should have a password and be a safe password. That is it. Nothing about how do you manage, the risks of, say, predatory behavior online and things like that. So there's a long way to go. And I think, I hope I have kind of flagged some of these issues and enlightened you all on these issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Ayesha. Based on your presentation only, there were 3 questions. Can those who wanted to ask those specific questions direct those at Ayesha, please, because it's directly related to the presentation. Can you all unmute your mic and ask the question, please?
Ayesha, this is Shamala. I just wanted to know how you, something about the sampling method, and I think is the size of the sample 1,600 odd? Is that what you said? I just wanted to know something about your sample,
Okay.
other than the age.
Right. So the overall survey sample was 2,000, just over 2,000 respondents, and in these particular, the number of households with children in them, so people below 18, is the number that you would have seen on the slide, which is 300. And the sample, of course, it's nationally representative. I mean, Tharaka can explain in more detail if you would like, but it's designed of less than 3% with 95% complex signal and so on and so forth.
Ayesha?
Yes?
Yeah, this is Lasantha. I don't know whether you said or not, just to actually clarify, what is the method of data collection? I don't know whether you said or not. I can't remember, that's why I'm asking.
Oh,
Method of data collection, yes.
So it was a household survey, face-to-face survey. So after sampling down to the household level, we then administered a small household questionnaire to the head of the household or someone who can speak to the household characteristics. And we get a roster of, we list down all respondents in the household who are eligible for the survey, and then we randomly sample from them to then ask a set of questions about their individual use, because internet and mobile use is fairly individual, right?
I think Sifan had a question.
Yeah, I had a couple. One was, so there was a slide about the cost per GB as percentage of monthly income. So on those deciles, were those the average monthly household incomes or individual incomes?
Yeah, so that was the mean monthly per capita income by this decile, based on the Department of Statistics HIES from 2016, sorry.
Then household
income.
Or individual income?
It's household income. We calculated the individual income based on the household income, because on the data we have was at individual level. So we convert the income decile data into household level data into individual level.
Right. So on your table, it's household.
The average. Sorry?
On the table that was shown, it's the household incomes.
No, it's individual income. All the data is there is individual level.
Right. Okay. And then there was, I think it was the last slide on only about 40% have done more than just browse the internet, and there was something. So I was wondering whether there was any impact on age in that. Like I would have thought younger people might have done more of those things. Older people maybe would have been less comfortable with that sort of thing.
Yes, yeah. I mean, across the board in terms of ownership, use, and the level, say level of advancement, we like to call it, in how they use internet. It's all very much, age plays a huge role. So exactly what you're saying. The younger group are very much more apt in this.
Okay, thanks. So with that, can we ask Tharaka to kindly make his presentation? You have just about 10 to 12 minutes, Tharaka.
Actually, Tharaka, do you have a separate presentation? I think it's a joint one.
No, it's this one only.
Yeah, okay.
All
yeah,
right.
so it's, yeah.
The statistical muscle behind all of this, I'm just the face.
Okay, right, Sujata.
Yeah, so now actually I think we all have a pretty good idea of the access and something about the devices that families have. But, and we know that it's 66% with internet access is a pretty high number. It's sometimes people are surprised because, these people are not in our circle of family and friends. but this is a full population. So, and I told you already about some things we've thought of, because there's devices, connectivity, and content. So, and we need to we like to hear from you. Actually, Tara, I don't think I have any more thing to talk about, but we like to hear from each of you. These anecdotes, all these things add up. Yeah. Anything you have tried, to where we can get some ideas, because interestingly, this issue has come to the attention of policymakers, that what I mentioned, that the smartphones are being used and that's best people have, but it has become such a hassle for parents. So they are looking for immediate solutions. And actually, if we can do a policy brief after this, Monday, if we can get it out, there's going to be traction. We can get something done. Actually, I need to say something about where we might have most impact. And we think that's from grade 6 to 9 age classrooms. Because primary, they have the grade 5 scholarship exam, and there are some TV programs that the NIE is doing. GC O-level, that is grades 10 and 11, they are being looked after, at least exam-wise. That's what parents want. And then advanced level, also they continue to run programs on TV, on Netra and ITV. So I think the space where we can make an impact and have some change, I think, is grade 6 to 9. If we can, do some changes at this while the iron is hot, parents are upset, they're getting too much stuff on smartphones, flooded with text and various notes from the teachers. And they're not, for one teacher, it may be they're just sending set of notes to the class, the subject she's teaching, but the parents are at the receiving end of for these grades 6 to 9, Ms. Pushpika Abhiratha can elaborate on this, 13 subjects. Grade 6 to 9, there are 13 subjects. And one child actually asked me, once she had heard me speak and she had sent a message to her mother, Ane ara antita baida me ahanna, ai me hamma teacher mai apata homework then. So every teacher, there are 13 subjects, e හැම එක්කෙනාම homework දෙනවා. සමහර දාට ඒ homework ඔක්කොම එක දවසට හම්බ වෙනවා. I think 13 subjects, I think, is a pretty hefty load. I know some people who actually teach and learn may not think so. But so the discussion again, let's think a little bit about this group. Which group is actually, this group has less exam pressure. We have some room for that. There are no national exams. So there's always a discussion of, we are going to propose that, some of the test exams for subjects where they teach, where it's about socio-emotional development of the child and citizenship and so on. So that those should not be tested, but those are big policy decisions. But in terms of devices, connectivity, and some changes to the way the teachers deliver the content. Any ideas? So Tara, if you can.
Thank you, Sujata. I don't see any hands raised on my interface, but anybody could please unmute the mic and make your intervention, comment, or ask a question, please.
Hello, may I make an observation? This is Mark.
Yes, yes, of course. Yes, of course.
Sorry, I joined this late and I missed the first part of Ayesha's presentation, but it was most enlightening to watch the latter half of it. Just to share a couple of experiences in terms of what we've done at St. Thomas's, if I may, which might add to this discussion. In terms of safety online that was mentioned, I think one of the first things that we did when we started online classes at the end of April was to compile some very simple guidelines for the parents on what should be monitored while their children were online. And this was done in all 3 languages, sent out to the parents with some very simple guidelines, nothing too complicated, but just to ensure that they would know what their children were doing and how safe they were online in the context of all the problems that are there for young people online these days. In the context of content, I think the biggest problem that Sri Lankan educators within the Sri Lankan system are facing is the heavily standardized system of education. And I'm sure you've already discussed this in a different, at a different meeting, perhaps. But, very often in reforms, say a subject syllabus is reformed, rather than taking away certain things before new things are added, more things are added to what is already there. So in terms of some subjects, you have one textbook which suddenly becomes part 1 and part 2 after the reform. So I think in terms of content, quite apart from this whole online issue, we really need to prevail on policymakers to reduce the content, to make it a little bit more effective. And even the number of subjects, years 6 to 9, I mean, I as an educator can see the burden that it has on children at that age to have to learn 13 subjects. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's just putting burden on the children, and how much they learn it's debatable, because up to O level, as most of us know, if we have a good retention power in memory, we can do very well, because all we need to do is mug up what's in the textbook. There's very little creative thinking, very little critical thinking, very little innovative options. It's all take what you are spoon-fed and reproduce. So I think it's a bigger issue which needs to be addressed, in addition to looking at it at this particular time when we are going online. And the final thing I want to say is a little bit about blended learning. I think the time has come for us to consider a way of bringing this whole thing into balance, to consider blended learning, where we have face-to-face and we also have online side-by-side in a parallel way. Thank you. That's just some thoughts from me.
Thank you very much, Reverend Bilmonia. Just one quick question before the others want to talk to you. Did you at any point in your experience, since you started online teaching after the middle of April, I think you said, at St. Thomas's, was there at any point or any kind of assessment to see the kind of performance of children with the online teaching, those with and without internet access? Was there an attempt,
yes,
even as a form of a continuous assessment?
What we did was we monitored how many children were coming online.
Okay.
And whenever we found that there were certain children who were not coming online, we would contact them through the class teachers and find out why they were not coming online. Most often it was to do with data. You know, as private schools, unlike the government sector, do not get free data. But at the same time, parents also have limitations on data. So data was a big issue. But apart from that, it was accessibility to the required hardware. Quite a number of children didn't have even a laptop. And what we did to try and solve that was to go to our alumni and ask for support in terms of obtaining second-hand or new devices, which we have then arranged for those children who did not have devices to have, so that no one would be left out of the equation. And wherever there has been a need for extra data or whatever, we've tried to help in whatever ways we can, especially in homes where there have been one or more, more than one child. That's where the problem has been most acute. And if the children have been going to different schools, it's even worse. So that is one. The second thing is that we've been having some very good interaction with the parents. And in general, the feedback we have got from parents is that, the whole thing is working for them. And they find that the child is more interested in the subject sitting and doing it at home, even more so than he was interested in doing it in school. Now, there may be other dimensions to this which we really need to find out why that is so. But the feedback we've got from parents in general is that it has had some desired impact in keeping the children in touch with their work. But what we've told our teachers is that we don't want undue pressure put on the children with this work. Keep them in touch, keep them connected, but don't pressure them, because at this time kids are also under pressure, not knowing what the future is going to hold, being tied down at home, for so many days without any freedom. All those pressures, coupled with the pressure to have academically achieve as well, is just too much. So on top of that, we've also provided a counseling service through our school counselors, whose phone numbers and emails have been shared with the children. if there is a need for children to talk things through, some of the pressures they are going through, then that option is also available and has been made available and is being available.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, can I ask a question from Mr. Yeah,
Yeah.
what percent of children had difficulties, families had difficulties, either the device or the connectivity? What percent overall?
Well, I couldn't tell you the
Roughly?
exact, but I remember if I did a count, and we had about 35 to 40 students in that first bracket. We didn't start. We didn't start the primary until much later. I'm talking of the A-level, O-level bracket. About 35 or 40 children there.
It's a handful, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And also, could you please share with us, Reverend Birmoria, the guidelines that you mentioned with regard to the usage of?
I could share the document with you.
Yeah.
I could email it to you if that's okay.
That will be fine. Thank you very much. Just email it to our email address.
Will do.
Right. So we have Anthony Suresh, whose hand is up, as well as Sifan after that. Anthony, yes.
Yeah. Thank you for the time. Good evening to everyone, especially Dr. Tara, Dr. Sujata. Thank you very much. And thank you for Ayesha and Tharaka for firstly done a good survey. And this is, I mean, maybe a sample, but it has given an eye-opening for us what is there in the field. So thank you very much. And good comment by Belmo. Thank you very much. Here now I think the situation is like when we having discussions with the parents, teachers, and children. They are waiting for the schools are going to open, so we will go to school and catch up what we have missed. So that is the I mean mentality now the children and the teachers and the parents have in mind. At the same time, now they are, I mean, engaged in this kind of online teaching process, learning process, and distant education process. And the main thing is like whatever they do now is being done as peer pressure or fear or something like that. It is going on, but they are waiting for schools are going to open and we will go and catch up everything. So in this midst, we had to think like, I always talk for the children who are not vulnerable, most vulnerable, who are in the urban area and missing the schools for these kind of, I mean, 60 more days. So those children, as what is nicely presented by Ayesha in the presentation, they have access, very less access to these kind of connections and even online courses. So, I mean, what we have to plan for the future is like now, yeah, the government says, the World Health Organization says, we have to live with Corona. So we have to live with that virus. So that is going to be there. We can't stop everything for that. So we have to go with our education and everything as per in the situation. So if it is like that, sometime there may be a sudden closure of one school. They have to close school for say like 1 month. Then they have to reopen it and run it. So that kind of situation will be coming, I think. Like, so for that, how our education, this as Dr. Sujata mentioned, the curriculum and the content is going to support. So we have to concentrate on the content and how we can match that for online classes and how that could reach for that I mean most vulnerable children in the remote urban areas. So that is very important, because those when I talk with those children in the field, I mean in the urban areas, village areas, they say we are playing. We are playing a lot in the evening, and sometimes we get 1 or 2 lessons from the school close by, village school, and we do it and we send it. I don't know who is correcting that, but we are there. So we had to concentrate on especially the assignments or the content, how that is going to be there for the children. Now, during this situation, okay, they are doing these assignments and everything, and after school started, what they are going to do? They are going to, learn the same thing again. If they are doing like that, then what is the reason of doing these kind of things distantly? So there should be a credibility and authentication for what they are doing now as an distant education by online or the other way. There should be a kind of an authentication, like, okay, this kind of period, like 2 months, you finish this, okay, that's finished, then we'll start with that. So that there should be a kind of very important thing we have to concentrate by reducing the content for the future. Living with corona, that is one thing I want to mention. The other important thing is like the monitoring part by the principals and the school teachers. Now that is very much lacking, because there are a lot of online teaching processes going on. Lot of printed materials are being distributed by calling the parents to the school, especially for grade 5 children. So how this is being monitored? How, what teacher is giving what? So who is monitoring in that? It is not being a principal in all the WhatsApp groups. I don't know. So there should be a kind of a monitoring system should be developed within the schools to face these kind of things. So that is very important, because when we give the lessons to the through the parents to the children to do it, so there should be an excuse. If it's a kind of an exam, there should be an excuse for open book exam. So that should be communicated. So who is going to do that? So who is the person who authorized that? So that those kind of things we had to think for the future when we go into this content creation and everything. Okay, now the children are in the city and the urban area. Yes, they are using internet. I don't know. Dr. Sujata mentioned it is 64%, but I think Ayesha mentioned in the presentation it is 34% internet access for the children who are there. I don't know. Please correct me if I am wrong. But that if they have access and how much they are using, that is also should be measured. I think that is also measured there in the. So we had to concentrate that very important two things what I have mentioned, because we are going to live with corona. So for that our move and our initiation should support that. So that is my 2 points. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I'm going to ask Sujata to quickly respond to that. And the figure 34% came up in Ayesha's chart, and that's, I think, what Sujata mentioned. Sujata, am I not correct?
66%, yeah. Actually, we say 60%, but Ayesha, it should be 66%, right? Not having access, yeah. We went for round numbers, but actually then it should be 70%. 66%, not 60.
You want to answer the other 2 points that Mr. Anthony Suresh raised, Sujata? Do you want to answer that right now?
What are the two?
About the content issue and about the management of the situation and the content, realizing the fact that we have to live with corona.
Right. Actually, yep. Right. That's exactly the point of this conversation here. We know that it's a matter of now when we had to have another closure. It's a matter of when, not if. So, but monitoring by principals, I think that's an interesting point. I think Mr. Birmoria can say something about that. But even of course in the university, nobody, the teacher is your faculty lecturer is totally in charge. Even in schools, I think once they submit their lesson plans, they have to do that early on. The teacher very much is in charge. Sometimes a principal goes around. So whether they do that in this WhatsApp space is something interesting to note. Yeah. So that monitoring thing is something we did not think about. Yeah. Also, and the authenticity, I think by that what he meant, I think, is these 2 months spent would be the same as 2 months spent in the classroom. I mean, can they go right back to so where they left off, when they go back to school, it'll be from where they left off in online. I think this is the first time this happened. So I think there's going to be, the teachers we talked to, Ms. Puch, I think the teachers in our group, they said they will have to do lots of afternoon classes and do a lot to catch up, because they are still learning here in this online phase.
Okay, thanks, Sujata. I'm going to Dr. Shamala Kumar because she has asked for a slot. After that, it will be Sifan and then Ira and then Charita. Can you unmute your mic, Shamala?
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you also for doing this, because actually we are all in the dark about what's going on, I think. So I actually have a bunch of questions and concerns that are colored from my experience in the university. So I would think that many of my concerns may also translate to concerns that teachers and students and parents may have among school-going kids. And so I would like to talk in terms of those three groups. Now, the presentation that was made was about children and sort of their access to the internet. One of my concern as a teacher is I don't know to what extent teachers are affected by what's going on, what's happening in their family situation, having their own childcare, so stressors, maybe other family stressors, and to what extent these may be affecting parents and their teachers and their teaching experiences. Another issue that I have had, and that a bunch of us have had, is that as a result of this shutdown, this is kind of related to what Mr. Suresh said about monitoring. There has been more of a sort of for us, there has been this kind of communication implicitly that we are being monitored, and that we need to watch implicitly. It's very subtle that we are being monitored, and what we are doing is there are people above the people who are communicating with us are being monitored, and so there's that kind of strange dynamic that is very new. And connected to that is also this, since the governance structures have changed and we're not having meetings as much, a lot of the communication is coming very much top down. So as a result, I think as a teacher, we have lost some of our, we could lose some of our, I don't want to say we have lost, but there's a danger of losing authority. And that worries me, particularly because we think of teachers as having individualized experience, relationships with students, and you want to sort of cultivate those kinds of relationships where a teacher has some discretion on the way they teach. And also another thing I noticed is as teachers, and as in the university, we have put a lot of effort and attempts to try and address the hardware and connectivity issue to some extent. I don't think we're doing a very good job. I mean, we could be. I feel there's still a problem, but little attention has been put into improving our teachings. I mean, there's a whole pedagogy associated with online learning and teaching. And I don't see much in that sense. And I wonder if teachers at schools are getting some kind of training, some kind of support in these kinds of things. That's from a teacher's point of view. Then from a parent's point of view, I think there's a lot of people talking about the various requirements made on parents, particularly mothers at these times, and the kinds of double roles that they have to play in this situation. To what extent has this been examined, and to what extent is there support for that? Then from children's point of view, I'm really glad to know that St. Thomas's is providing counseling services for students. To what extent do other schools provide such services? To what extent do their psychological needs, because I'm sure it's stressful in so many levels for students. To what extent is that addressed? And finally, to what extent are students getting individualized attention like they might have got during class? To what extent have these modalities allowed for that to happen? Those are my questions. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Shamala. Anybody wants to respond to her with regards to the 3 areas she mentioned, and particularly the area connected to the university, teachers, mandate, and the current scenario?
I'd just like to make a comment, and I hope somebody else also will join it. But I thought it's interesting in Anthony's oration, what he said that I heard is that, there isn't enough monitoring. And in the case of university, because our universities have so much autonomy, and there's a sense that there is monitoring. So these are 2 different situations, and I think maybe I've been a university teacher. I think there has to be some little bit more accountability also by university teachers. So that's my take, Shamla, I think. But whether it's going to be surveillance, but not surveillance, but some sort of accountability.
Can I clarify that? Just may I clarify?
Yeah,
so I really don't want the focus of this to be universities. I'm just reflecting on my experience and thinking about how it affects schools. But monitoring in the sense that we would not let somebody come into a class without getting permission and sit there while we are teaching. I think there are certain conventions that are good. It gives a certain professional respect to the teacher. And this is not just for us. I think it's true for school teachers too. It should be true. And that's what I'm referring to. There are certain sort of ethical, professional standards that we might be violating now, and we need to sort of protect our professions from them. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. Anybody else wants to make a quick response to Shamala before we go on to Sifan, who is waiting with the hands up?
May I say something in response?
Yes, please, Reverend. Please go ahead.
No, just to respond to that point about supervision, I think it's important for the identity and the integrity of the teacher that supervision is not intrusive, and that students do not get the impression that the headmaster or headmistress or head of department sitting in on a class is there to police in some way. There is a way to do that in such a way that it won't be seen as an infringement of the teacher's identity and integrity. One of the things that we did before we went online on the 20th of April was to give teachers a basic introduction to what they should do online and how they should do things online, so that they were not just thrown into the deep end and they were able to handle this new dimension of doing things, the new way of doing things. And as was pointed out, the pressure on some of the teachers who had to be at home, look after their own kids and also do the online classes, that was a very real pressure. But what was really heartening was the teacher who would tell the class, I'm having this issue today, and you could do that in a senior class perhaps. I'm having this issue today, but I'll be able to come on a class later on in the day if you don't mind coming on at that time so that I can put my kids to bed and then take your class. You could perhaps do that with a small group of, say, 3 or 5 A-level students, but it may not be possible with a class of 35 up to O-level. But different methods have been looked at. But it's very important, I suppose, to help the teachers to also have a sense of dignity without infringing on their identity and integrity.
Can I come in? Can I come in? Thanaraj. Thanaraj.
Yeah, yes, please, quickly. Yes, Mr. Thanaraj.
Yeah, I am at SLIT.
Yes.
So in this, we started some online teaching. So I teach for B.Ed class, Bachelor of Education class, and I have 26 students in my class. When I started using the Zoom and started some lectures and all, only 10 students were there. And all the 16 students, they informed, they have this problem with cost problem. They have data problem. Zoom is costly, right? Then, so they said they can't come into the class. But it was good. It's interactive. You can ask questions, and it's just like a class, right? But it is costly. So what the university said that make a video of it. Your lecture, you can make a video and upload it in a web. We have a separate web, so we uploaded it in all. So every student, that is free. So all students can watch that when they have time. It is free, right? So it is same. What I did in Zoom, recorded and uploaded in the our separate web page. And also it is monitored because the dean of the faculty can go how many web page, how many videos have been uploaded and all. But the problem is many students, even university students, they don't have access to internet. They have problems. Many students don't have a computer. They access through via phone. So this kind of practical aspects are there. Even at school level, I read in 15th Daily Mirror in Ratnapura, out of 4,000 students, only 160,000 they have access to internet, telephone, or radio, or television. So that is the situation. It was in a paper. So these kind of practical issues, accessing through internet, that should be addressed first. We have to live with. Somebody said we have to live with Corona, right? Corona is going to stay there, so we have to teach. We have to do teaching and learning. We must find different ways, and we must look into how we can do it in a better way.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you very much. Can I go to Sifan, who's been waiting with his hand up? Yes, Sifan, please go ahead.
Yes. Okay, I tried to get my video back on as well. Okay, so some of the things I wanted to share was we had actually started writing this down after the last week's dialogue, but didn't get around to sending it across yet. So partly what I want to share is about a practical way of going forward. And it also touches on maybe some of the sort of what I like to call elephants in the room in this case. For example, I think when this crisis hit, there was expectation of schools, of the students, and of the teachers themselves that the teachers would be in control of whatever was happening in terms of distance learning. And therefore, we've seen classrooms via Zoom or classrooms via Teams or whether it's YouTube. So all of these things are centered around what the teacher can do. And also, as Reverend also mentioned, because of how this education is seen sort of like this downloading of information into people, then when you look at things from that perspective, then content becomes the key thing, and everything is about how can we ensure access to content. So even all these statistics about internet access and devices is because we are worried about how can we get the content across. So we have a because of the exam-centric system, we have a content is king situation. But before coming to that, I'd just like sort of from the practical aspect of things. So probably the O-level, A-level, Year 5 scholarship, those exams are the ones that are going to open up physically for students sooner, because other schools are a huge infection risk. And then also when we have these mega schools where people are traveling from large catchment areas in crowded public transport, in crowded school vans, that sort of thing isn't going to go back to normal very soon unless somebody comes up with a vaccine very fast. So some form of virtual education is going to continue for a while, but unlike, let's say, until recently, where we had a lot of people under curfew, so you effectively had to be at home, so whatever you could do was at home. We now have a bit more mobility allowed, and one of the things I think that this can be tapped into is to have small local groups. So people in a village, people in a street, you get together, right? So even if you're still hung up on downloading this content from somewhere, then it means that you now only need one device for this and one connection for these 8 people who are getting together. Or if they're going to watch it on the TV lessons, then you need just one TV, or if it's like dialogue TV or TV, you can rewind it and watch. And this opens up the opportunity for children also to be learning from each other. So if there's one person who understands this content more than others, they can ask that child the question. And I mean, maybe didn't have this in practice so much in schools, but in universities it happened a lot. So after the lecture, if there's something that's not clear, then you go to somebody who is familiar with that, and then there's like a mini copier sort of thing happens. So that kind of thing, there's no reason it can't happen in schools. It's just that, or with school age children, it's just that normally the school environment doesn't have any much space for that. But with this sort of local communities, you could do that. So at one level, you could have all same age children, but it would actually work a little bit better for them to be of slightly mixed ages. And they could decide which of the homes that they're from has some space, and they could roster the time between those. Potentially, you could have maybe a teacher dropping in from the vicinity, somebody living nearby. So that teacher doesn't really need to be a sort of subject expert, because if you want to learn Pythagoras theorem or whatever it is, you're getting it from YouTube or wherever. But this, the teacher's role is more about just sort of checking in, showing interest, how is it going for you, and a little bit of a Hawthorne effect of showing that somebody's interested in your progress and stuff like that. So even at a very basic level of consuming this content, and even if you want preparing for exams, you these 8 kids can do the papers together, right? So you learn from each other. Okay, why did you do this way? What is this? And it's a lot safer for kids to ask questions from other kids than from a teacher, because the teacher will turn around and say, "No, are you stupid? I told you so many times what those sort of bullying things." The space is a bit safer in that kids community. And then going beyond that, there is, in this sort of spaces, actually a lot more possibility for learning to happen beyond that prescribed content. So let's say normal times, we had people organizing run cells, organizing pandals, those sort of things. And these are also very valuable learning experiences in, say, project management, teamwork, leadership, fundraising, marketing, all those sort of transfers of skills. So some particular forms of those may not be applicable in the sort of restricted movement, but they might decide, let's organize some sort of delivery service for our area, or let's build a foot operated soap dispenser, or I don't know, any sort of project is learning. And it doesn't have to be prescribed from the top and everybody's building a dispenser at the same time, but even that sort of thing could happen. So you could, like this song that Surasa is doing, and people are making recordings and sending it in. So you could have like a hackathon or competition that's running on TV, and like a prize and things, and some people would participate. But even beyond that, if they want to bake something or make some sort of community gardening, all of those are valuable learning experiences that just could take place. And these are the kind of things that I think ideally should more things should happen, but because of those elephants, it's not easy for, let's say, policymakers to see this. But if we do a large number of these things, then at least some students, some parents will see, this kind of thing is working, and how can we do more of these things?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Sifan. Just a quick reminder, like we mentioned to Reverend Bill Moria, if anybody has suggestions and kind of comments or ideas that can go into the policy briefs that we'll be preparing, we'll be really grateful if you could email those to us. And like Dr. Sujatha said at the beginning, by Monday, we hope to send in our first policy brief. So if you can send us something by tonight or tomorrow morning, that will be really good. Thanks very much.
One thing if I can add, Tara, actually some offline solutions, because as you know, 66% of households do not have internet access. I don't know whether Navaka can talk about some of those offline solutions. Some things, because another thing we need to remember is there are textbooks. They are color printed, and they are, for every subject there's a textbook. So that the Sifan, the kind of activities that Sifan talked about, actually, Ms. Pushpika Berat might can confirm this. If you take citizenship, that book has all kinds of activities suggested also. So actually, it's a matter of teachers been told and encouraged not to be, repeating the content, but to do these activities, give children guidelines for these activities. But when they do these activities, they need supplementary material. Our children, we are used to just Googling everything. How would these children do that? Where would they get the supplementary material offline? So some ideas on those would be helpful. Keeping in mind that they have the textbooks. What we need is how to supplement that.
Yeah. Thanks, Sujata. So we have Iranjali next, after which Yashinka has been with her hands up, and then we have round 3.
So I agree with Mr. Sifan that this has to be a long-term perspective when we are taking account of any policy change that goes through. But 3 areas I like to point out, which is accessibility, devices, and the fact that there are different populations. So these are the 3 limitations right now. Is there any possibility, I know this is, again, I'm just putting it out there, to have or promote through the education forum as a policy for a partnership between perhaps government and maybe a large tech provider or a data like Dialogue to host a cloud system or a platform where we can take a longitudinal perspective in providing access and the devices and data that's necessary at lower cost. This is obviously going to be a part of a policy suggestion. So we'll need a tech provider for that and a broadband provider plus Ministry of Education probably as a partner. Just putting the thought out there.
Thanks, Ira. Sujata, you want to make a comment on that? Charita also is here. He can also make a comment on that.
Yeah, I think I'll let Dialogue because Dialogue already has guru.lk. I think maybe Charita can.
Charita, can you just say a few words to Ira's point, please? There you are.
I'm very sorry I dropped out for the last minute or so of what she was asking. I had raised my hand earlier. I have other things to add as well to what Dr. Sujata said. Can you just repeat what you need me to respond to right now?
Ira.
So basically a partnership probably with Ministry of Education, Dialogue, and a cloud hosting platform, basically a tech partner, so that in the long term we can train teachers, can then train students, because this is going to be a long-term solution, right? It's going to be a total different approach. So in the meantime, whether we can build these systems for the future, is that a solution to the limitations of accessibility, getting devices across, and well, starting with, let's say, like Mr. Sifan mentioned, the most the population that's needing it right now, beginning with the O-level and A-level students.
Yeah, so I'll tell you about a few different things that have been going on with a few different players involved. I think Yashinka was here. She can comment about Microsoft also, with whom we have been working. I mean, one of the most impressive technology sector turnarounds has been how Microsoft has become a huge power in cloud computing. So they have been supporting the education sector and transitioned all their education and other tools to cloud-based, cloud-driven systems. So Microsoft has been working with the Ministry of Education for a long time, long before even the cloud emergence. And Dialogue has been working with the ministry. The thing is, it's a little tricky when you have a for-profit shareholder-owned company that is having to work with a government that is very welfare-oriented and believes that all things should be free and very uniformly allocated. But basically, Dialogue has done a lot of things completely at its own cost with the Ministry of Education for many years. But education tech is an industry. It has been a growing industry, and there have been a lot of people filling a lot of gaps as well in trying to make money in that as well. So we can't leave them out. We can't ignore them either. And a lot of them are actually quite willing to take part, share, support in that work as well. So one example is a company called Head Start that Dialogue invested in recently, which has been around for a long time in education technology. So guru.lk, the website where you can learn spin bowling from Rangana Heratta, how to cook something, or how to do hairstyling, all those things. That was actually what they started with, but they have a lot of other more school education oriented.
But this is not real time, right?
It's not real time. Sorry, I'm kind of taking a slightly circuitous route to get to what you're saying. So Head Start, Guru.lk is online and has certain facilities. They have a lot of young, not necessarily government service teachers, often very talented and very successful in terms of outcomes, tuition masters and ladies who have a strong audience, who they also work with, and they actually, because for me, online is great, but as Dr. Sujata said, I mean, offline is also quite valuable, and you need backup for whatever you do, and people can't always afford to access anything. If I have a power cut, I can't use half the things. So we have to have all those tools with us. So now the government, the ICTA and such agencies have been trying to get all the different government agencies online. So they do have a government cloud. They do have a national data center, which are actually pretty impressive and pretty high tech. So they are getting some things on there. Dialogue works mostly with the, well, my division works mostly with the ICT sector of the Ministry of Education, and previously Mr. Nil Gunadasa, who's still working in other parts of the IT sector for the Ministry of Education, and the Nanasa unit, which is something we have set up, have been working on getting a lot of content online. So if you go to eTaxalava, just search it, e-Taxalava, that is all government education material from, I believe, Navaka can correct me, but I believe from year 6 to 9, and I think some other grades as well, is online and available. And those are all, of course, those are government hosted, completely free. Of course, people would be paying their data charges to access those if they're accessing it off commercial connections. If they're doing it from the school, it's absolutely 100% free, and content produced at the cost of the government and all those things. Dialogue has been supporting the government for many years in producing material. We, because at the time we started this, internet or broadband penetration was 10% or 11%, we didn't bother with online. We started with what people have in their homes, which is a television. And I mean, almost every household has a television. So they can access content. Of course, right now it's on a broadcast model where it is scheduled and you know what time to get in front of the TV for your class, and you can watch certain content. And of course, again, going with government priorities and limited resources and need to prioritize, it has been focused on O-level, English, science, maths, but we have been putting steadily other content onto it. But we want to explode that bottleneck as well, and the internet lets us do that. So Microsoft had been working with Head Start, who I mentioned before, and Commercial Bank, who's also a very active player in getting schools connected and getting them resources. So we have Dialogue basically took a program that they had been already working on, and we try to upscale it. It's tricky to do. It's a very resource and person intensive task called the Nanasa Smart School program, which some of the teachers here also may have heard of. Basically, it's a digital transformation program. Teacher first. We work with some ambassador volunteer teachers, and they need not be the ICT teacher. And we introduce them to all the Microsoft and other cloud-based tools, YouTube and everything, free.
Hello?
Yeah. Charita, are you with us? So,
I think he got stuck.
Okay. Right. Shall we come back to him? I just want to give a quick reminder about actually the topic for our discussion today is really to discuss about distance learning opportunities for those without access to internet. So there we are looking at something like 60% or a little more.
66%.
So 66%, that's right. So after this, if we can actually direct our attention to that component, because we are looking at radio, television, postal services. Those are all things that we can look at. I mean, postal services is 100% access. So we've not creatively made use of it right now. Television is, I think, something like 91%. I'm reading out from LIRNEasia stats. Radio is 71%. So can we also look at those available devices and facilities for this large group of people who do not have access to internet as of now?
Doctor, is it possible, Dr. Sujata, is it possible when you mentioned offline activities to make the topics or maybe even assessment based on projects where they have to actively look through their textbooks, because that will actually get their skills, meta skills going where they have to learn rather than being spoon-fed?
That's definitely actually what we are thinking in our policy brief, because then we need the evidence to show that there's mass amount of quantity that is coming content. So we got some anecdotes and we are doing online survey, and once we show the authorities that what's been coming down is what's on the textbooks coming back to students, they could give a say broad guidelines, say even on TV, radio, for teachers to get, but exactly what you said, get children to use the textbook. Send simple guidelines to for the text. I'd give you an example. For grade 3, I saw this teacher sent 19 pages about animals around us and things we use and another topic. And I was thinking actually all she needed to send was one SMS text message to the parent. It's about animals around us. It's about there are 3 kinds of animals: pets we keep around the house, and the other animals around the house, and the animals outside. All she would do is get the child to get 3 pages on the same page, 3 columns, start observing, and over the period, just write down. That's all she should have said. But instead, she sent the child the note she would have put on the board. So she sent a list of everything we use, makanaya, pancharaya, and all that she lists and she describes. And this is interesting. This is what the teacher would actually do in the class. So this actually brings you to the question, what are we doing in the classes? Explaining what's in the textbook. So this is, I think, a very good opportunity also to say, no, you don't have to explain the textbook. Nobody's seen that before. Now we are seeing that the parents are seeing it on their smartphone. This is what's happening in the classroom. So whether teachers should be encouraged to send simple messages, because the data is at a premium. You should not be using it on trivial things that are in the textbook. So that message, if we can get the authorities to get teachers to send that message, don't send what's already in the textbook. Send simple instructions for activities they can do at home, which are linked to the curriculum. Say like in your textbook, this page, read that and do that. So that is something, I think that's probably something that will go into the policy brief. But one thing is, where are the children going to get the supplementary materials? That is, because middle class children, upper middle class children, they just go and, search the internet. So that's, even if we can't give the supplementary material now, what if schools open and then what's preparedness for another closure? how can we give supplementary material? Actually, I'd like to ask Navaka for some ideas if he's willing to.
Can I just interrupt you because there are
sure.
people who have been waiting with their
Okay.
hands. I want to ask Yashinka, and after that, Ranitri. Yashinka.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Yashinka Jayasinghe, and I'm from UNICEF, Colombo office. So we have been working very closely with the Ministry of Education, the NIE, as well as with 4 of the provinces, that is Northern Province, Uva Central and Eastern, being the most underprivileged provinces for quite a while across the board in terms of WASH, which is water and sanitation, nutrition, child protection, education, social policy, and so on. So I am from the education team, and my inputs today would be more or less from an education perspective. So I think a lot of the speakers spoke of this education reform process, and I think Dr. Sujata has been heavily involved in that as well. And unfortunately, although the Ministry of Education and NIE started this conversation last year and continued it in the beginning of this year as well, it has more or less come to a standstill in terms of the education reform process because of this ongoing situation. So I don't think anyone was really prepared for this situation. So now it's more or less working with what we have. So again, it would be to a large extent a replication of the existing curriculum, which has to be reformed, as we all know. But now it may not be the most appropriate time, or people's priorities are a bit different at this moment, but definitely a conversation which has to take place parallelly. So from UNICEF's point of view, we see both this online and offline components coming into play, more so offline, because even for us, globally, regionally, as well as in Sri Lanka, our focus is more on the underprivileged and creating more equal access. So equity is key. So offline becomes even more important. And to that end, I did see Ms. Kumudu from NIE on the call. I'm not sure she's still there, but there has been ongoing conversation with the NIE, MOE, and the emergency response team in terms of catering to primary students, because it seems that primary students will be more or less left behind. And there was a lot of push for offline printed material to be developed. And to that end, also the consultants at the Ministry of Education wanted the socio-emotional skills also being built in. But at this point of time, again, putting that onus on the parents becomes another challenge. But they have developed certain printed material which will be going out. I think it's now in the process of being printed for entire grade 1 and grade 2 students in the country. And then Ministry of Education, so UNICEF and a few other NGOs and agencies also contributing financially. And this would be going out to all grade 1, grade 2 via the postal service and through the provincial and the divisional and the zonal level intervention. So Ministry of Education will take on that entire process. I'm not really too sure how the nitty-gritties would work out, but they would take the action to get these delivered to either the schools, and from the schools to the communities within the area. So that's going on. And there was discussion again for extending this to the other grades, but that has not yet been finalized because of the funding situation. But this was basically on the 3 main subjects, which is language, either Sinhala or Tamil, ERA, and mathematics. So related to grade 1, whatever the kids had learned in term 1, it's more or less like a revision and some activities, experiments, and observations which children can do alongside their parents. So assessments was discussed, how to assess whether this is going to be effective or not, which again is a challenge. So at the national level, the instruction was for the parents to jot down whatever is possible in the workbook that is provided or in the exercise book, and then bring it back to school when the kids come back. And in grade 2, there was a diary also mentioned where the kids have to kind of make note of what they are doing each day, and they have to bring that back as well. So that is underway. And then the assessments part. So since we work with the provinces very closely with the provincial departments of education, there is ongoing discussions with the provinces on how to kind of build these little communities where teachers can connect with their students, not just one-way communication, but two-way communication, at least by giving them a weekly call or so on. So that's still being discussed, not a very easy thing to kind of grapple with, but that is being done. And at the provincial level, there is a lot of, again, this balance. They have really taken into consideration the balance of online and offline. So whilst a lot of offline content is being done, they are also parallelly working on online for the higher grades like the A-level, O-level, and so on. But here again, challenges in terms of budgets, funds, printers, laptops for teachers, for the directors to kind of develop this content and print it out and package it and send it are also concerns. And I think these are again being discussed with the national level. But this due consideration to offline, online is taking place. So private sector, I think as Charita also mentioned, structured classes is taking place. My child also attends a private school. She's in grade 5 and they are fully on Microsoft Teams platform, and they have 2-hour sessions, 1-hour sessions, 2 per day for the main subjects, and for the other extracurricular like Christianity, needlework, art, and so on, the teacher gives them some assignment which is uploaded onto the system. So where they have to look at that and come in. And it's good because it's not too much of a burden for the child. It's just 2 hours per day, not too much of a burden for the parents in terms of ensuring that data, all of that is provided. And at the moment, it seems to be working well for them. So the more privileged kids again are getting more access, and we fear that this divide is going to kind of exacerbate for the not privileged. So at the moment, we see a lot of the action at the provincial level happening on this offline, online, scrambling to make sure that this education continues for everybody, plus getting the infrastructure back in place for kids to return to school. So in most schools, wash or the water and sanitation becomes an issue. Supply of water, then supply of clean water, enough access points for hand washing, soap, all those again become practical issues, and schools are also preparing at that, both at the national and provincial level for reopening when that happens. So in terms of the content, again, now, for example, UNICEF, because of presence in the provinces, we are having a number of discussions with the provinces, and the northern province seems to be quite progressive because they have come up with this forum for e-learning and so on. So there again, I think I refer back to Charita's comment on Head Start, because Head Start, we are partnering with them anyway on a project in Kilinochchi for digital transformation. And we are trying to work with them to look at how we provide bite-sized training for teachers. Because teachers, even if schools reopen, will not be able to go back to the traditional way of learning or the capacity development. So this would also be an opportune moment for us to look at online learning or continue with professional development, which is enabled better through online learning, because there are a lot of challenges at the school levels for releasing teachers, for getting them out of the classroom, where teachers have their own personal lives to attend to. So then continuous professional development for a teacher is also tough. So online could be one way of doing it. And about 3 years ago, when I was at Microsoft, I know that Ministry of Education had this huge plan of giving every teacher a laptop, a device with connectivity. So 250,000 were supposed to be given this. A-level students were supposed to be given tabs. O-level students were supposed to be given devices. So if all that was in place, there would have been less of a struggle at this point, because I think Dr. Sujata, I saw an article that you had written, Sri Lanka is not ready for online learning. simply don't have the devices and the access as of now. But going forward, if we can put these mechanisms in place, anticipating future whatever pandemics or issues which would come up, this could be somewhat of a solution going forward. And we are also looking at empowering teachers on these bite-sized modules for them to learn how to teach using technology. So it doesn't have to be online, but if it's even through a WhatsApp group or a Viber group or through a TV channel, how can they teach more effectively? Because there is a lot of, otherwise kids are inundated with too much of content at the moment. So we are looking at that, and then also looking at maybe exploring partnerships with the mobile network operators in terms of access and whitelisting sites and creating these little learning centers and providing devices and so on. So conversation is going on. Yeah, so lots going on at the moment. So UNICEF too is trying to frame it and
would the learning center be a potential answer to Dr. Sujata's question on getting the resources that the underprivileged children who don't have access at the moment to request for these materials?
So at the moment, I know that SLT, I think maybe even Dialogue has their Nanasa, and now they have the Guru channel as well. So these are like access points where kids can meet, get together, convene, and access some of the content which has been developed. But then again, the question is the quality of the content, how interactive is this content? Is it simply a replication of the traditional way of teaching? So the content itself has certain challenges, and I mean, since so many providers and well-wishers and people are doing their own thing, sometimes it's a bit difficult to kind of assess the quality of all this, but there is potential to explore that as one of the options. And just before I kind of close, there's one other area which kind of gets left behind or falls through the cracks is the preschool kids. So kids between 3 to 5, like what exposure are they given and what guidance are parents given to keep these kids stimulated and engaged whilst at home. So that is an area which is also not kind of getting highlighted.
Thanks very much, Ashinka. I just want to ask Charita to make one comment with regard to what you said about the NIE and the work that you all are doing together. Yeah, Charita, can you quickly make your intervention, because I have to go to Rani 3 after that.
Yeah, I hope someone from NIE is on this call. Sad to say, I have absolutely no faith in the NIE. We have been, I've been at Dialogue for 8 years. We have been trying to work with them with different leadership under different ministers for whatever things. They are unfortunately a very, very important stakeholder. They are the gatekeeper for signing off on whether any content, not only any content, but any textbook or any material is okay to go into the school system. Actually, technically, they are supposed to even sign off before you walk into a school and make a presentation as anybody. And sadly, I mean, it's a you feel like wanting to take a shower when you walk out of a meeting with them because they just block everything and profess to have done a lot of things and have had a lot of things, most of them which are years out of date. But that's what they trot out when they are hauled up for a meeting. Sadly, because the NIE is semi-independent, they have a lot of clout that even the ministry officials can't get around. So we have been working with ministry officials who are desperate to get something online, something out on TV, but they couldn't find any loopholes. I mean, we were talking about setting up studios elsewhere. They have the best of equipment, some of them given by us and Japan and other countries, that are used for private practice, basically.
Do we have anybody from, is Kumudumati here? I wonder, NIE? We invited the
She's left. Yeah, she was here. She has left, I think. Yeah. Actually, can I respond to that, actually?
Sure, Sujata.
NIE is doing the teacher guides, I thought, Charita. The books are published by the Education Publication Department. And also I was thinking, you know, what we probably need is content that brings together the text. For example, let me give an example of Bangladesh has this called teachers.gov.bd, which is really a teachers forum set up by the government. Actually, there's no reason why teachers can't do it. Teachers develop lesson plans, creative ways of doing things, and they share. And then they get the best lesson plan and so on. At this time, I think I really liked what Yashinka was saying about the grade 1 and grade 2, they developed the textbook and they mailed it. So they are using print and mail, and there's calls are given to over the phone. So we are using where we have 100%, almost 100% coverage. That is mobile phone, just voice phone, and text and mail. So I think for other higher grades, we don't have time to be printing. But I don't think what NIE's got, why can't people build over that? Say some for grade 6 civics and all these lessons put together, why can't people come up with activities and things to do with the text?
I think what Sujata is trying to say is actually the role of the NIE is really not absolutely essential in the current scenario. Am I correct?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I think even one teacher actually, she asked me, they have a Microsoft Teams developed by the school, it's a major Colombo public school, and she was asking me, can't we teachers have she want to have a teachers team, but they can't do it within the school, so now they are going to develop a WhatsApp group. So I think we need to, there's so much the government can do at this time, the bureaucracy to respond quickly. And I was wondering whether teachers sharing forum and that kind of, what we need are, the textbooks are there, the teacher is there, what we need is some activities, some ideas to connect those. For grade 1 and grade 2, developed a workbook. We can't be printing workbooks, but it would be just take, say, the food, learning about nutrition. You know, one simple activity would be every day what you eat, take a table, make a table and put it under the table, you know, under this, spreadsheet, and just say which food belongs in the protein category, which food belongs to the carbohydrate category. So that's an activity I think Pushpika we talked about with the teacher that we're working with. You know, this is how you would do an activity for the nutrition, which is just, you know, it's not one lesson you that you do in 1 to 2 hours or 1 week. It's something that the child does right throughout the period that the child stays at home. I think we need a lot of those activity ideas. How do we get them out to the teachers? I think is something, if we can do that very quickly. Existing teachers, existing textbooks, I think all we need is a simple instructions sent over text, even SMS. But
I can look up some learning styles in terms of giving material to teachers to know when to use what particular learning style and to do it in a concise manner. So I can look that up and send them over.
Yeah.
So that there can be an interaction, like interactive design as well. So that's something I can do.
Can we have Rani to give her Rani 3 a chance? She's been waiting with her hands up for a very long time.
No worries, I was listening. I especially appreciate Sujata's comments on activities. In fact, I'm a professional. I'm kind of an accidental educator. I'm from architecture and design, and I've fallen into education by being a volunteer art teacher at a children's center in Kirlapana. It's a very interesting space because it's in a Vatta, but it's also one of the few places that has a children's center with a library, computers, but no teachers. So having this extracurricular art class has given me a lot of opportunity to experiment with activities. And I'd like to share just, to hopefully relax everyone, 2 stories from our experience. One is on accessibility. We've been thinking for the last 7 odd years with a bunch of friends, not just me, But one of our students who's exceptionally talented, and I would like, perhaps he has been done an injustice by our education system because he failed his O-levels, extremely talented, but he didn't have the access to the tuition classes and all that. So he, in a sense, became a steward of our art class. He came volunteers for every art class. As he grew older, he's now 22. He comes every weekend to the center and teaches alongside us all kinds of art projects. So when this coronavirus, all that happened and we could no longer go to the center, he has access to internet on WhatsApp. And he also downloaded, this is why the dialogue presence is also important to me. He was able to get 1 gigabyte of data, which he used, in a sense. What I'm talking about is perhaps the notion of stewardship in education, where there's one person for this community. So I WhatsApp him, like I'm saying, okay, don't force the children to do this. If they want to relax, give them this exercise. And I WhatsApp it to him. And this is one very tight-knit community. I mean, they're literally sleeping on top of each other. So, social distancing is basically that entire community is together, locked up. So he goes from house to house to the door of the child and gives him an exercise, like make a health poster to educate your parents and your family on how to stay safe during the coronavirus or something. And the project is actually called Let's Build Great Things, because we want to, not just in the guise of art education, we want to encourage critical thinking and social emotional learning and all kinds of, supplementary but very helpful means of education. So he, in a sense, became a steward to spread the education, and he filmed all the kids at their door with the posters. So it became this participatory, very engaging project, and that has been only one of the things we did. The second story I'd like to mention is content, and also I think I posted it on the chat, something that Pratham has inspired us as well to do, where they created a series of games that were kind of secretly educational. And I'm mostly talking about like the 6-year-old to 12-year-old group. For example, one was for them to make a vegetable market at home, where they had fake money and they weighed the, tomatoes in grams, and they sold vegetables to their parents and their sisters and all that. And, mimic this kind of, that was in a way, it's a game, but it's also educational. And something we also gave to the child was we wanted to provide them a sense of relaxation, let's say. So we asked them to draw a circle, divide it into 16, and draw a mandala. It takes a very long time to draw one, but it only takes a pen and a piece of paper, and it can be very therapeutic. And we don't force the kids to do this, so they end up doing it. And there's no exams, so they end up doing it. And there are lots of, I think the next thing we're going to do is a self-watering plant with a plastic bottle, a self-watering pot with a plastic bottle. But I would encourage perhaps the people at the Education Forum to look at what Pratham has been doing, because I find it completely inspiring what they're doing through this, like Sujata said, a one text message prompt that encourages students to look outside at their world and let the environment be their classroom. So that's the kind of, the two stories that I have. And I would love to share more stories and be involved if it is helpful to you all. I mean, I'm not a real educator, but these are experiments that I think are really exciting, and I'd love to share.
Thank you so much. Would you also like to send us a brief email giving an outline of your personal experience in relation to the stories? Thank you so much.
No worries.
We have Lasanta from World Vision and then Adam. Lasanta, would you want to go first?
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. Now, actually, we were talking about online solution as well as offline. So, offline solution, yes. Here I am talking about now, actually, we have to think of what are the offline solutions. Actually, have we done any kind of research on the offline solution, now schools are practicing, teachers are practicing to teach as well as from the students to learn. Because the thing is, actually, we know that from the ministry side, secretary to the ministry, periodically he is actually getting progress from the provincial education director. Provincial education director periodically getting the progress from the zonal education director. Zonal education through divisional education directors penetrate to the school and monitoring. I know that actually monitoring how far our students are directed to the kind of a TV education, the lessons they are doing. As well as we know that in certain schools they are practicing their own methods, offline methods, but very actually it is very spread. I don't have any evidences, but have we done any offline educative solution at the moment? Teachers and the school are practicing. If we have that kind of research and the evidence-based kind of a research, then we can advocate to the government or NIE. You can endorse these kind of things rather than finding new solution for the offline, as well as how can we train the teachers for offline methods, right? Offline methods. That kind of intervention is needed nowadays for the actually government, from the government side. Do you have any idea about that offline current solution at the moment that schools are practicing?
Can I respond to that?
Yeah,
Tara?
please.
Yeah. Actually, there are two ways to do that. One is a good practices study, and in the middle of writing a proposal, and the other one is action research, where you actually engage with the teachers and develop the methods with them, whatever they have. We are trying that right now with one of the schools, with one of our partner teachers, and doing the good practices. It's going to take time, but we are just, it's not a very scientific method, but we are picking up some ideas. And the one about the food, how to learn about nutrition, and that kind of thing actually came from that kind of interaction. So for the time being, it's just, it's not a scientific method. We're just taking whatever we can here, but we need to, this Corona period is a really nice natural experiment. We've been trying to get ICT into education. We have ICT education. That's totally different thing, two different things, schools can set up a curriculum and get the students and set up some sort of a qualification, and you can teach ICT. But integrating ICT is something totally different. And this is one of the good things about this Corona interregnum, where we really, IT has come into education, So no, the research will take, proper research will take time, money, and we are writing a proposal for that. One part is a survey of teachers and parents, and the other one is action research, where you work with teachers to take the existing curricula and develop activities. Actually, it's mostly about developing activities. When you are in teach, you can't just do projects with them. It has to be learned. At the end, it has to be tied to a learning outcome. So yeah, it can't be done right now. We don't have the time. So we are just doing this kind of casual collecting of information. Something systematic has to come later, but not too late. It has to be done very quickly.
Thanks, Sujata. I'm going to Adam. Can you please identify your organization, because it's not in you've not indicated your affiliation.
Hi, I'm working at Atlas.
Okay.
Currently. So just someone from an outsider, from people that actually provide education. It seems to me that most of the existing education, at least that can still be done remotely, it's reached a level of maturity where, if you have a textbook, technically, if the parent is overseeing, the student can learn that particular subject. But I was wondering how, with regards to policy and funding and sort of the efforts being put, how it affects, like the people that are not able to sort of access online learning, they can still learn most of the subjects that the students that can access online learning can do as well. It's just a case of, the different modalities of content. So you can access more dynamic content online, but that's about it. But with regards to some of the new subjects, so like problem solving, IT. That's not it's not reached level of maturity in actual the textbooks and stuff that kids are given and taught at school. I was just wondering how that is seen, because that's really for me that seems the biggest gap, because people that have online education will still be able to pursue that kind of mode, but people that don't, just it's impossible. So
yeah, so that's really the focus of our discussion today, which is the use of distance learning for those who actually do not have access to internet. And we just had a series of inputs about the necessity for content, how to use that content, and what are the methods. And that's what Sujata summarized a moment ago with regards to using all the tools we have at our disposal without any problem, like the postal services, like the simple telephone, like the simple television and the radio and so on. So that's where we are, Adam, as of now, but that's got to be, like she said a moment ago, given is in an evidence-based manner to show how these have actually can be used and how it has benefited even in clusters of teachers. So this is the kind of work that we are trying.
And just a quick question, like a follow-up question with regards to that. What do you all see as maybe the main stigmas attached to sort of online learning, especially with the lower socioeconomic classes? What are the main barriers? Because cost is one barrier and the infrastructure is one, but is stigma a major concern as well? Because sometimes I've heard people say, don't use your screen for more than an hour, they'll go, it'll affect the eyes and stuff like that. So is that a major concern in adoption, or?
Sujata?
Anybody in the audience? Yeah. Well, let me say something. No, another one is the safety. I think safety is a major issue. Some parents have actually, I've heard parents say blanket rules, no internet until they're 18. I think that's a major barrier. And the other one is, I don't know, maybe that these kind of things that it hurts eye and so on.
And is that reflected across socioeconomic class? So, for example, is it much more pronounced in the lower socioeconomic classes, or is?
We don't know. No, right now I think we are focusing on the access issue. But I think if one thing I find interesting about online and offline resources is online actually for parents, it's such a open, wide, it's scary for parents. But if you give them something in a USB or some sort of a micro card, I think there's some learning material. It's supporting learning material. It could be games, but I think parents are more comfortable, I think, at this stage. So if there are any concerns, I think these offline products are really interested in learning about them. But we need to get the children going online, because it's nothing like, going and searching for things on your own and discovering. But to answer your question, some of the stigmas again would be addressed by offline content.
Yeah, Adam, is that okay? Do you need to?
Yeah, that's okay. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. We had somebody else with the hands raised, but then again we have Lasantha. So do we want to, Lasantha, have you finished your input, or do you need to?
Yeah, sorry, it's a mistake, sorry.
Okay, Sifan. Yes, Sifan.
Yeah, so on this subject of activities and who is creating them and things like that, I recently remember a small sort of anecdote from my childhood where we happened to have a sort of large garden space, and at home there was this book from the agriculture department that said, if you want to grow this is how you prepare the soil, this is the distance between the rows, the distance within rows, how we water them, what fertilizer, all those sort of things. And I used this book as a resource to experiment with growing certain things. So we had brinjals, tomatoes. I tried to grow carrots in watercolor, that failed. But like if you compare doing it with an offline book like that, so like I was fortunate to have the book. What if I didn't have the book? And then the fact that nowadays I could go on Facebook groups or Quora or something and ask questions like, why is my avocado tree not bearing fruit and all those things. So there's a lot of opportunities that are created online. But one of the things that really made that experience work for me is that nobody asked me to do gardening. Right? So I could see adults around me doing gardening because they cared about it. They were getting some pleasure out of it, and that was the inspiration for me to do it. So if somebody had told me to do gardening, look, there's an activity, why don't you do gardening? I would have either ignored them or done enough of it to make a show of the fact that I was doing it, and then just ignored it, which I think we can relate is how children will respond when they feel forced to do something that has no meaning for them. So the problem with our sort of content-centric approach is that if we have gardening in our syllabus, then we will insist that every 7-year-old knows to grow brinjals. We will not leave any room for anybody to not grow brinjals or to not want to do gardening. And even that example that Ranitri was sharing, so that is an activity that arose from the community. So maybe the adult steward was able to propose it, but he had a different relationship with that community where he wasn't trying to impose a syllabus. It was something that made sense for that community, and they did it. Now, different communities could share ideas, and if they want to take it on, they could take it on. But if you try to harvest all these ideas, send it up to the NIE, they make a policy document and proposal and all these things, and it comes back 3 years later, by then maybe people don't need to be washing their hands anymore. So that sort of centralized approach always takes time. It's even why, I mean, ideally, I think Dr. Sujata also mentioned this, like it would be great to talk about coronavirus. It would be good to talk about how viruses mutate, how do antiviral things work, why does antibiotics not work. So, but because schools are stuck in their syllabus, when they go back, they will go back to teaching what's in the syllabus, and they will not discuss COVID in the classroom until it goes up, is formalized into a syllabus, and then 3 years later, maybe it will come and people will learn about how a face mask works and things like that. So on one side, there's a problem with this centralization, and then on the other side, how do we recognize the agency of the learner in this process?
Thanks very much, Sifan. Does anybody want to respond to what Sifan was saying? Any comments on that? Okay, Charita, again, your hand is raised. Is that a mistake, or are you with us? Please unmute.
Yeah, if I may, just a few quick things. I was taking down some notes on which I'll run through quickly.
Yeah.
About getting teachers to produce their own content. We have been doing that. They do some amazing content, especially when we give them the tools and give them some coaching on pedagogy and all these things, using all the different, not only digital stuff, but also digital things in how they deliver the teaching experience. But there is an incentive problem, because that's why all teachers, most teachers do tuition classes as well, right? So they tend to have their own notes. Even in class, they'll sometimes come and they'll be teaching you from their set of notes taken away from the syllabus, and they aren't often comfortable sharing it. So we have a competition for the most engaging content that the teachers have produced during that whole digital transformation program, and they don't like to share that content. It's amazing content, but they don't want to put it online and make it available to everybody. So then we'll have to be mindful of human nature and that incentive problem, particularly if they could be making a lot of money as tuition teachers, tend to do. Maybe not now. To one of the things from the very start of this conversation, I'm very wary of the statistic that 60% or 66% of households self-reporting that they don't have internet, because most people in this country, if you ask them whether they have internet, they will say no, or whether they've used the internet. Then you'll ask them, how about Facebook? Yes. How about WhatsApp? Yes. How about YouTube? Yes. How about TikTok? Yes. But those aren't internet, is what they will say, because I mean, browsing is no longer a big habit that some people ever used, because they just go straight into some app that does a specific task. So another anecdote that I have is we have a program that's been running for 5 years with some of the lowest internet penetration due to several factors is among the agricultural community. One is, as with all farmers all over the world, they are older, but also they feel they have very little use for mobile technology. So we had to do a lot of focused research on what would they really use it for and all those things. And it took a lot of effort. We got a very basic, very simple system going. The most complicated part is registering. Thereafter, you just press the green button when you're getting a call. That's all you do. Because these were the kind of users who had the phone in the pocket but still didn't want to use it. But what we saw very quickly happen was their usage shoot up, including data. And the anecdotal thing is, they go home, somebody in the family has a smartphone, and they say, "Ayo tate, oy mokadda me balannako mama video ekak pennannan." We are giving them the very basic information needed to get their crop to harvest stage. But then they start realizing that there's all this information, and of course, because it's relevant to them, they suddenly start accessing. So I would want to place a lot of context around whether households really do not have access to connectivity and technology if they wanted to. If they don't want to and the attitude is different, then we can't help them. But they might be perfectly fine and happy without tech. But this also maps, I believe, to an inverse of what was on slide 18 of Ayesha's presentation, because that showed 40% of, so this if you can put up the slide, it showed at the start we said 60% of households don't have internet access, but the inverse on that slide was about 40% who did have access. So maybe if the slide comes up at some point, we can talk with. Another quick one, between year 6 and year...
Is Ayesha still there? I wonder whether she can give a quick response to what you said now. Has Ayesha?
Yes. Hi.
Quickly respond to what Charita said about the slide and the discrepancy, if any.
Okay. The 60% number that you're having trouble with, I guess. I agree that browsing is really no longer a thing. But the way we ask the question, it has a kind of a bit of a broader definition. So we say, have you, first of all, we ask people, do you know what the internet is? And there's quite a number of people who still don't, about maybe 1/3. Then among the people that know what it is, we ask, okay, have you ever used the internet, for example, using Gmail or Google, Facebook, email, and so on. And I would then also say that we also then, when we also look at the numbers for social media, which is, again, we define, for example, Facebook and so on, those numbers kind of very closely tally with the responses to having used the internet. So we see the fact that those two are kind of, in all the countries that we've studied, those two numbers go along very closely. So I'm coming to the point that we kind of agree that a lot of the internet use is it's no longer internet per se, like how, the old conventional way of thinking. A lot of it is through social media, but then through social media, then you kind of connect into other things and follow links and so on and so forth. I think that was, I hope that response, that answers your first point. And also, I would add that this survey is, the data is 2018, and we all know this, these things change very fast. And especially now, I think, given the situation where we're, everyone from, the pan kade on the road to, everyone, my mother is forced to, now get online, get on Pick Me, get on WhatsApp, call and order a loaf of bread and so on and so forth. I think with all of that kind of, the current situation, and again, in the context of education also, I think that will definitely push things forward. And I think it's a good opportunity in that sense. Sorry, I didn't follow the point about the slide which you mentioned. slide 18.
Yeah, I just felt that what I was saying about the household internet access, that it mapped what I was saying mapped somewhat to what you were saying on slide 18. That's okay. If I can just add two more things.
I have to give one turn to Dilmini, who's with her hand up. After that, we have just about 10 minutes to wrap up. So if there's time, can I come back to you? Sure. Dilmini, please unmute your mic.
Hi, Tara. Can I be heard now?
Yes, please. You can go ahead.
Awesome. Thanks. So first and foremost, thank you so much for having this. And I think it's phenomenal that there are so many who are willing to really come in and support and create change where I think is most necessary for all of us in the country. I am from Atlas, and there's some of us who have joined in today. Reason that I wanted to kind of have 2 minutes to talk here is to say we would love, we pride ourselves in being a company that is closest to the hearts of the kids and teachers in Sri Lanka. And we would love the opportunity right now to say how best can we come in and support, whether it is with the online community, whether it's with the offline community of kids, teachers that still need support in terms of content, in terms of maybe bringing synergy in with the different people who are currently working, whether it's platforms, whether it's access to the locations with printed material, whatever it may be. And I think this is a great forum if I can open up and say, I will post my email address on the chat. If any of you would be willing to share your ideas or what you think we can kind of come in and support, what areas need most support here, that would be great for us because we're still trying to kind of formulate where we can fit in and where we can support. So ideas would be more than welcome.
Thank you very much, Dilmini. We certainly will give some thought to it, and we'll in fact maybe send a joint proposal that is from EFSL. If NI is going to be part of our work, yes, but if not, at least from EFSL, we will get back to you. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tara.
Ishara, you have raised your hand apparently, but I haven't seen it.
Yes,
can you please speak, and after that? Yes, please, go ahead. Ishara.
So in this scenario, we just think about the students and teachers and the policymakers, but what would be the role of parents? As my view, in the current scenario, parents are not let students to do self-study. So most of parents are not allow their children to do self-study. For example, sometimes the parents want to do everything for higher teachers for every subject. Even we talked about the practical education. We need more practical studies, but the thing is, parents are not allowed their children to do alone. Even this online education or the offline education. But we need to think about the parents' mind changing or something, because otherwise we can't do these things, because I think that's why the tuition has arisen like this. So we need to change the parents' mindsets also to continue this thing, because that's my view.
Thank you, Ishara. Reverend Pirimori, I'm going to give you the opportunity. Can you please address Ishara's point before you make your point with your experience?
Yeah, I think parents are central to this whole exercise. What's interesting is a number of parents who have got back to us saying, look, we are not able to actually help our children because some of the stuff that's being taught to them now is not stuff that we learned. We had this experience with some grade 5 parents who actually said that when they had gone through some of the grade 5 past papers, they just couldn't even get anywhere towards answering those papers. And they said, please, can you give us more classes rather than just sending them material to do on their own, because we can't help them. So there is this situation where parents are also finding it a little difficult, because the material that the children are learning today, the syllabuses, the content, it's so different to what it perhaps was when many of us were in school, that it is a little tough. But parents have asked for help as well. You know, they've asked us to provide extra. We are doing things in a limited way, as I said, for many reasons. And parents are saying, don't just send us the material and expect us to do it with the children. We find it difficult. We would like you all to do it. And so then we have to consider whether we are going to give extra time on these online classes. So I think Ishara's point is noted. The parents are also a very important group here, and we have to keep them in the equation. What I wanted to say as a point before I sign off is to just say that this is perhaps the ideal time for the reset button to be pressed. And I think a group like this can certainly offer a lot of input to those who are in the process of changing things or in the process of making proposals for change. There is a lot to be done in terms of out-of-the-box thinking, new directions, and perhaps whatever comes out of this group in terms of proposals or policies would be very helpful to those who are already engaged in this very same process at this particular juncture. Because there is a concerted effort being made to bring about some change going forward, so that when we come out of this situation, we will be ready to make those changes in the future. So I hope that this group will continue its work and put forward proposals which the policymakers will be able to take up and look at. So thank you very much for having organized this.
Thanks very much, Reverend Begonia. With that, we've just about 10 minutes more, and I think that's just enough for the wrap up. Before I hand over the floor to Sujata, I just want to remind everybody to please fill in your details in the form that Eurasia has mailed, because that's very important for us to keep in touch with you guys. Second thing is just another quick reminder about the mandate of EFSL, which I think some of you know, but this is just to reiterate it. We are a group of people who just gathered a few months ago only, and our job is to catalyze policy reforms through debate and dialogue and discussion. We don't have any authority or mandate to directly influence or hope to influence anybody, but we do hope, just like what Reverend Bilmoria said, through our discussions with people like you all of you who have either direct or indirect experience and understanding on the subject, will be able to prepare policy briefs, which is in the process now, and hope to share with those who are, as you said, engaged in this process of reform and change. To me, COVID-19 is totally a blessing in disguise in terms of education. It really opened up the stars, and at least we are even talking about trying to change the spoon feeding and the entirely teacher-centered approach. I'm not saying that we'll succeed 100%, but at least we are talking about it. And with all of you who have so much of experience, it's really a great thing. So EFSL also hopes it can be like a watchdog body to just keep looking at what the policies that are coming out, make relevant interventions, touch the correct buttons at the correct place, hoping we will succeed. So please do send us on email any comments, any kind of suggestions you may have. And like what Dilmini said a moment ago, if there are any offers to help in whatever we are doing, we will be extremely grateful, because this is the time to do something. Let's use this window of opportunity. Thank you very much, and over to Sujata for the final comments. Unmute the mic, Sujata.
Is it muted? Yeah.
Now it's fine. Now it's fine.
Okay. Yes. We have been talking over the media. I think that's right. About one of the things, catchphrases has been, notes and tunes sent over WhatsApp is not education. So then we have been thrown the challenge from the NIE actually. Okay, then tell us that it is really so, that there's so much, you have to establish that parents are inundated with material, get some data. So for that, actually, we, with Ishara, Ishara is from Kantale, and they have something called Youth for Sustainability, Sustainable Development. We developed, he actually developed a questionnaire So we are trying to first send it to actually selected group of people so that we know actually who's responding, and get that data out, collect that data within this weekend actually, to present a policy brief. And the idea is, we thought we will focus on grades 6 to 9 because a nice starting line for anything to government would say, government, you have, people, you have done a great job on TV. There's lessons for advanced level, there's lessons for O level, and there's lessons for scholarship exam. So let the teachers tell the teachers, don't inundate families with more material, but try to use that data very much more efficiently, smartly. And then how they do that, again, we got some ideas from here. So the policy brief is essentially going to be evidence that there's a burden on parents, and focusing on grades 6 to 9 or maybe 1 to 10. Hopefully government will send out, our objective is government will send out a message to teachers to focus less on content, remind them the textbooks are there, and to create activities which can be communicated very easily. So that's essentially what we are thinking of sending for the message. And we are trying to get more information from our survey and from this conversation here. Yes, and I think actually I'm really happy that we got some new perspectives, particularly thankful to Shamla, just the online pedagogy issue. Maybe actually we like to again, St. Thomas's, I find, has always been in the forefront in this, and we are going to borrow from them. You talked about guidelines for students, and if you had any guidelines for teachers, I think that's again something we can share. Because this terminology, online pedagogy, because pedagogy as practiced in the classroom is not ideal, we know that. At least this online situation is a chance for us to change that. So, and but then we talk about as online pedagogy, hopefully will transform back to the classroom. Because the classroom pedagogy is right now teaching to the exam. And no, we can't actually, parents' mindset, something Ishara said, changing mindset is I actually don't like to use that word, because that means we are not going to get anything done. But the changing mindset, I think the way to do that is to change the exams. And we are working on that. That's our main goal, actually, to change the exams, and without that we can't do that. But in the meantime, I think we have a little window with grade 6 to 9. I hope the teachers may I'd like to hear from the teachers later on that, and make some submissions that at least in those grades where there's no pressure of national exams, that's a place to start with this new pedagogy, with online pedagogy, and then lessons learned from online pedagogy reflected back into the classroom. And with the online pedagogy, some ideas are, not to try to transmit that everything that you transmit to the children in the classroom, but to be very parsimonious in what you do. And particularly taking into account the needs of the bottom, the 66% who are without access. That means maybe you have to think of something they can send over text. So it's in a way a blessing in disguise when these resource limitations, teachers have to limit the content. So I got a lot of notes, I got so much information, and have to sit down, get those numbers from the survey and write down something very quickly, because this is the time to change the way we teach, even in a small way, as Mr. Reverend Bilmore was saying. This is, we need to somehow change it even in a small way. So thank you, and over to you, Tara.
Yeah, so I think with that, we will bring this third policy discussion to a close. I think with each policy dialogue, we are learning more. We have a more diverse set of people participating in comparison to our first one, which was in the Kingsbury Hotel. We just had something like 20 people, and now today we had well over nearly 40 people who had enrolled with us. So it's very encouraging, and we hope to keep engaged with you in the coming weeks. And we are extremely receptive to any ideas, any suggestions that you may like to share with us. And please continue to engage with us in the future. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Ayesha, for all the tech support. Thank you.